Hello and welcome to DTV, your source for news and information on the Democratic Party and politics in Knoxville. I'm Michael Davis, and I'm your host for DTV's closer look at the candidates running for Knoxville City Council election on November the 7th. DTV would like to remind you that early voting is already underway and runs through November the 2nd. If you need more information on early voting, please go to www.knoxcounty.org/election. Today we have with us from the 6th District, the City Council candidates of Gwen, McKenzie, and Jennifer Montgomery. Gwen, Jennifer, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to DTV.
Thank you for having us. Thank you.
I'm sure that things are getting quite busy in your lives right now. It seems like this election is just right around the corner, which of course it is. So how are things going for the two of you right now?
Well, it's an exciting time. I think it's sort of like, I tell people, it's like going to the fair when you were a kid and riding all the rides and waking up the next morning and thinking, I mean, I know I had a good time, I just can't remember what I rode.
Right. Gwen, would you say you're having a similar experience about now?
Well, extremely busy. If we thought that running in our districts was a major feat, running citywide is like being on steroids.
Right.
A lot of ground to cover, a lot more neighborhoods and people to touch and talk to, but it's exciting, it's fun, and we'll be glad when it's over.
I'll bet. Catch a little bit of a breather at that point.
Yes.
Okay, well, District 6 would most commonly be referred to as East Knoxville. We've got several issues to get to today, but just very briefly, describe your district for our viewers and tell us about why you're running to represent it. Gwen, we'll start with you.
Okay, so the 6th District, you're absolutely right. It is comprised of East Knoxville, but we also have downtown. We have part of Sutherland, and we have Lonsdale, Mechanicsville, part of them as well. So we have a very eclectic district, per se, for the 6th District. I like to consider it the heart and soul of the city. Since we have downtown as well. I'm actually running for city council because I feel like I'm a candidate that can make a difference. I feel I'm a candidate that connects with all people. I'm a lifelong resident of the 6th District. My dad moved us here back in the late 60s. He was the first executive director of the Urban League. So of course I grew up seeing advocacy for all people, and my dad and my mom both fighting for equal rights for all people. My mom being a retired school teacher and an avid volunteer, that just became part of my DNA. So really enjoy getting into issues and helping people, and so that's one of the reasons why I stepped up to run.
Okay. Jennifer.
The 6th District is a lot of different neighborhoods and commercial districts. There's all the many neighborhoods surrounding the Central Business District, and then Magnolia Avenue, McCalla Avenue, and a little bit out Sutherland Avenue on the east side. McCalla Avenue and Magnolia Avenue on the east side. I'm someone who is entrenched in the business community as a small business owner. I'm also my neighborhood group president and serve on several other community-based organizations. I have a Master's of Science in Urban and Regional Planning, so I think I'm someone who I'm the candidate that has the right experience and qualifications for right now.
Okay, thanks. So, getting into a little bit about development, which I think both of you would probably like to touch on or have touched on there. Tax incentives are tools that have been used by the city recently, especially in downtown and some other areas, to encourage development there. Going forward, do you think that those sorts of tax incentives are still appropriate? And if so, where and how? So Jennifer, we'll start with you on this one.
So with tax incentives, the key idea is that it should happen, but for the development wouldn't happen without the incentive, without it incentivizing the developer. I have an economic development plan that talks about trading developer incentives for affordable housing. Whereas downtown, we negotiate for things like structured parking. We could incorporate affordable housing in the context of market rate housing that could potentially be extended to affordable lease rates for startup businesses.
Okay. Gwen, your thoughts?
So as it relates to the tax incentives, I do feel like they are just that, an excellent incentive to be able to incentivize those businesses and that development in different areas of the city. I feel like downtown we've done an excellent job of that, capitalizing on that. I'd like to see that filter out across the district in different areas, particularly with the Magnolia Corridor coming into play. I think that that's a great opportunity for us to be able to incentivize those developers and also to look at keeping, I guess, policing a little bit better. What's the return on the investment? Are we giving incentives to corporations and businesses that are going to bring in external people to take those jobs for employment? Or are they actually employing people that are here in the neighborhood and in our communities? I think that's an important piece of it, and that's key and critical, but I am in favor of continuing to use those.
Okay. So just to follow up a bit on that, Gwen, what sort of guidelines would you use, principles would you use in determining what sort of these tax incentives, or who the tax incentives should go to target that kind of growth?
Yeah. So I think that what we'll have to do is we're going to have to look at those particular companies and developers that can, what do they have to offer to the community and to the city at large. And then from there, we have to just continue to have some guidelines and maybe even introduce some additional guidelines to say, okay, if you get this, we want to make sure that you're employing X percentage of people that are qualified for these positions that are Knoxville residents, city residents.
Okay. And Jennifer, same question to you. What sort of guidelines would you use to target, to make sure that the right kind of development, if they get an incentive, is actually receiving those?
So for me, the ideas are affordable housing and affordable opportunities to start up business. If you think about the ability to start up on a place like Market Square, you can see how that would be hard for lots of business owners. So I think we have the opportunity in the districts to be proactive about some of these ideas around affordability and socioeconomic diversity.
Okay. District 3, or excuse me, Knoxville's city election has a voting rate that seems to traditionally be pretty low for the city elections, whether it's a district primary or the entire city election. What do you think contributes to this, and what problems does this indicate? Gwen, we'll start with you on this one.
Well, I'll be honest with you, it's consistently been low as far as the voter turnout is concerned. I was really hopeful that we would see a greater increase. I think that we got to at least 11% citywide in the primary elections. But because, especially with the 6th district, we had 13 candidates that were running for this particular seat. So I really felt that would prompt a lot more voter engagement. One of the things that I think that we have to continuously do is educate people about voting, the history of voting, voter rights, and especially women's rights to vote. A lot of times when I have that level of conversation with people, it does spark their interest and has them to look at it in a different light, that voting is a right, it's a privilege as well. And a lot of people sacrifice greatly in order for us to be able to have the privilege to vote, especially for minorities in general. We just have to continue to keep plugging along at it and talking to people about the importance of voting. The New Sentinel actually, pointed that out, that we actually had candidates that did not have very good voting records as a result. And so I've been getting hit with that question quite a bit. If you guys want us to vote, why hasn't it been important to you all to vote? And so that's kind of puts another caveat on it. But again, it's about personal responsibility for voting, and we just have to continue to educate people on that.
Okay. Yeah. Jennifer, what's your take on low voter turnout?
So for me, I got excited about local politics when somebody close to me ran, that I didn't necessarily agree with everything that they said. So I spent lots of time going to coffee with that person and debating the issues, and they were kind enough to take the time to do that with me, and I hope they grew from it. We had different views on different issues. So in that process, I started to get the feeling, gosh, I could really be useful and I could really be helpful. And so from there, I started thinking about and watching local politics. But one thing I'll say, I lived on Washington Avenue. I've lived there for about 15 years. And the first time a candidate knocked on my door was this year. In fact, it was 2 weeks ago. So I think that it is a door-to-door process of helping people and encouraging people that have a lot to offer, to not only vote but run for office. I think it's a door-to-door process.
Okay. This question is for both of you. What would you say to the person that would say that my vote really doesn't count all that much, my opinion doesn't seem to be listened to, I don't feel represented, those sorts of issues, that it has nothing to do with people that aren't able to vote. They know that an election is happening. They just don't feel engaged in it enough that it would work and out to their benefit. Jennifer?
For me, it was sitting down with somebody who I had a lot of questions about their positions, and I got engaged. I didn't always hear what I thought was right or what I wanted to hear, but it was sparking that conversation, and that led me to look at other candidates at the local level. So for me, again, it's it's sitting down and going to coffee, even with people that you don't agree with. To spark the kind of engagement I think that's important. But again, I think there are people out there that have a lot to offer, and if we don't take that effort, if we don't make that effort, that door-to-door effort, we're leaving a lot of good qualifications and experience on the table.
Okay. Gwen, your thoughts on that?
So the main thing that I tell people these days when we're out talking and we're out canvassing in general in the neighborhoods is, look at Washington. And this is what happens when you don't exercise your right to vote, because we have a lot of people that are registered to vote. And so to say that we're only getting 10 to 11% of those people out to the polls, I always look at when people are complaining about what's going on at a national level, this is what happens when we don't exercise our right to vote. You'll wake up the next morning and you'll have a surprise that you didn't expect or something you thought could never happen. And so again, I just encourage people, if you don't vote, you don't have a voice. And so it's easy for us to always complain about what's not happening and what's not getting done. But when you vote, you actually put your power behind one person or a couple of people that you feel is going to make a difference. Then I also use the example of the fourth district race, where one vote really could have made the difference.
Really could have there.
Yeah, in that tiebreaker. And so I think those are excellent examples that I use to help educate people about the importance of voting.
All right. Knoxville is currently reviewing its city zoning policy. So please share with us some of your thoughts on what you hope will be the best long-term result of this recode, and what principles should the city use to guide this policy. Jennifer, we'll start with you.
So I have a Master's of Science in Planning, and this kind of zoning was something that we talked about a lot when I was in planning school several years ago. It's more performance based, meaning that, and here's the example that I use, if you have a factory next to a house or a residential building, as long as the factory doesn't create too much traffic or too much pollution or anything that would harm the residents, those two uses can exist together. So it's based on the performance of the uses. The current zoning is 50 years old. It's much more based on automobile transportation. It separates uses. Let's put factories over here and houses over in another district. And I think that has done some damage to our urban neighborhoods, to our urban districts. I think it's one size does not fit all with zoning, but I'm looking forward to it in the 6th District and in downtown. I'm looking forward to having a zoning that is more accommodating of alternative ways to get around and people living near where they work. I think there are a lot of good benefits that can come, and I think it's one of the biggest things that City Council is going to face in the next 4 to 8 years.
Okay. Gwen?
Well, I'm excited about it as well. I've actually been to a couple of meetings and seen some of the initial plans that are out there. The one thing that I'm not comfortable with, and unfortunately people don't seem to always agree with this stance on it, but I'm concerned that we have a little over 1,600 people that provided input on the zoning that's going to impact us, not just us, but our children and our grandchildren for the next 50 plus years. And so that's a real big concern to me. Also, when you look at the survey, at the end of the survey, it asks for your ethnicity. And so to see that, only about 53 to 58 people that identified as African American or other participate in that survey is very concerning to me, because I really feel like we may be getting some skewed viewpoints of what people want to see as it relates to the zoning. I mean, I'm in favor of mixed use zoning. I do think that it's needed, but I would like us to kind of step back and say, is there some additional entry points for some more input from a larger audience across the city of Knoxville? When I asked that question to the Recode folks, they felt like 1,600 people was a really good number of folks to be able to participate in, because they usually, I guess just like voting, there's not a lot of people that are engaged in this process. But what I will tell you is that I know, especially in the 6th District, there are a lot of people that just were not aware of the survey and of the deadline for the survey, and what happens to those people, especially those seniors that don't have access to internet, that may not have an opportunity to be able to provide their input. And so that's a concern for me.
Okay. All right. Moving on to policing, safety, and community health issues. Policing issues are a deep concern all across the country, of course, in nearly every mid-size and large city. What policing issues do you see in Knoxville? And if elected, what influence would you exert to address them? And Jennifer, we'll start with you on this one.
So when I'm campaigning, I ask people, do you have your police officer's name and contact information? And some do and some don't. And I think we have to get to a place where everyone does. We have to build that relationship so that we see our police officers as interested stakeholders, as people who care about the community as much as we do. And of course, then we would want them to be that. Right now, we are short on officers. And I think that is part of the solution. I just was endorsed by the Fraternal Order of Police, so I'm really proud of that and the officers' commitment to the community, of the safety of the community.
Okay. And Gwen, your thoughts on this?
So as it relates to people in the community having that officer's name and phone number, I do know that the people that attend their neighborhood association meetings or homeowners association meetings are going to be familiar with who that person is. But you have a large majority of people that don't participate in those organizations. And so we're talking about there's a shortage of officers right now, and for 100 people to have one officer's name and cell phone number probably is not going to be doing a disservice to that officer. But I think that what has to happen is that the community actually has to step up. There are more good people that live in our neighborhoods than there are bad. We're going to have to look at ways to encourage a neighborhood watch organization and groups, and then just block party type meetings because there are not a lot of people in some of the East Knoxville neighborhoods that engage with the organized groups. And so we need to see better engagement on that level.
Okay. Just to follow up on that question briefly, some people have said that the type of zone police coverage that we have right now in the city, and especially in certain areas, and I've even heard that that East Knoxville and areas there are where this is used, is spreading spreading officers too thin and ineffective. They think that that sort of a beat cop approach would be better. Y'all have any thoughts on that?
I've heard ideas like these. I think our officers are spread too thin. We don't have enough officers. There are ideas around kiosk policing, having an officer available at a certain time so that people can come by and have a conversation with that officer, maybe on their way home from work. I think all of those things are good ideas. I think they're going to require more officers.
Mm-hmm. Gwen?
So one of the things that I would advocate for is I think we have to step back and look at the starting pay for officers, for our public servants, because these people put their lives on the line every day, and I think that if we were to be able to increase that starting base pay, we would probably have a better opportunity for recruitment and retention of officers. So I think that's one of the ways that we need to start.
Okay. All right. We've come almost to the end of our segment here today, but just briefly, in Knoxville, our city council elections allow citywide voting after the district-only primary. Do y'all think that this manner of voting is working for Knoxville, or does it need a second look? Gwen?
I think that we probably need to give it a second look, because I spend a lot more time explaining to people why they're voting outside of their district when they say, why am I actually voting on someone else's representative when I'm really just concerned about mine? So I think it deserves a second look. Whether or not it's going to change or not, I think that has yet to be seen, but definitely I think it's worth the look.
Okay. Jennifer?
I like the way that we proceed in voting. I think it's important that people from other districts take ownership and excitement about our district. Certainly a lot of things that face city council are citywide decisions, and so I think that the at-large portion is an opportunity for city voters to take that ownership and have that buy-in in the district.
Okay. Well, there you have it, folks. That's the end of our segment for today. Thank you so much to our candidates from District 6 being here today. Gwen McKenzie, Jennifer Montgomery, thank you for taking your time with us here today.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
And that wraps up DTV's closer look at the candidates running for Knoxville City Council election. We encourage you to turn out for the vote. Early voting has already started and runs through November the 2nd, and Election Day is on November the 7th. We'll see you at the polls. I'm Michael Davis, and this has been DTV. Thank you for watching DTV. If you've been joining us earlier, you've just seen the last of our city council candidate interviews, and we'd like to welcome you back briefly for just a little bit of a wrap-up session on the city council candidate forums. And with us here is Doug Viam.
I've seen every one of these taped, and I've been quite impressed, quite frankly, with the interest that the candidates show, both in the questions you ask them, but also in the interest that they show in the city. I think it was, it was good to see so many of them together, because you really start to see how devoted they are really to what they're doing. I mean, this is not just something that they wanted to do for fun. They're taking this pretty seriously, and I think that came across really well in all of the forums. And I hope that if you haven't seen them, look for them on YouTube. So yeah. I
think these will be for those last-minute voters that are out there that haven't gotten to see some of their candidates in action at a live forum. I hope that people can tune into this to check out what was said about some of the issues that we have here today, because I think we covered a few important topics, things that are very relevant to the average voter for this particular election.
Exactly. I think so, and it's hard to know what the issues are in the city council, because you don't get the television coverage, you don't get the newspaper coverage, you don't get the talk around the coffee table, I don't think, unless you've seen something like this, where we've had a chance to talk to them. There have been some forums around the city, and some of them are pretty well attended, but here's one where a lot of people could see it, and hopefully they did.
Yeah, and I think the issues that you brought up there, of this being largely a new class of people coming in from a lot of diverse backgrounds, so we've got the potential for just some really fresh candidates in office, and that's really exciting. And I hope that excitement carries over, because I think city elections, local elections get a little overshadowed by the explosive nature of national politics, especially nowadays. But it just matters so much.
The torch is being passed. There's no question about that. I mean, I think we've got a great city council. They work well together. I think they've got the city interests at heart. But this group that's going to come on the city council, which will be the majority, by the way, be 5 of the 9 candidates. 5 of the 9 councilmen. They're going to be a very different. Their experience has been very different, and their experience about the city, how they view the city, is different. Frankly, it's being passed from my generation to yours, and that was pretty obvious. In the forums.
It's definitely gotten me excited to see how this turns out. If the primaries were any indication, then this should be a good, exciting general election.
That's right, exactly.
So,
speaking of the election, what do people do now, Mike?
So it's time to vote. Early voting has already started on Wednesday, October the 18th, and that's going to run through November the 2nd. So just to get more into that, and by the way, all the information that we're discussing here comes straight from the Knox County election website, and that's www.knoxcounty.org/election, or just the .org part will get you there. That's that front page.
I think you can also type in knoxvotes.org. I think that will also get them there. But you're right. It'll get you to the same place, and it's all right there.
And there's a lot of great information there, particularly in where you can go to early vote, which is a very important thing. So early voting locations are the City County Building downtown on Main Street, and that's on the main floor next to the 4th Circuit Court. There's Downtown West location at 1645 Downtown West Boulevard, and there's the Love Kitchen at 2418 Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue, and New Harvest Park at 4775 New Harvest Lane, and also Cecil Webb Recreation Area, and that is in South Knoxville on 923 Baker Avenue, which is also listed as 953 East Moody Avenue. I think there's some address changeover in the midst there on that, evidently. But so you can go to those early voting locations. There's different schedules for each one of those. Most of the time, though, they're opening at 10 a.m. and closing at 6 p.m., except on occasionally a few of the different locations will be closing at 7 p.m., such as, but the City County Building, I think it closes a little earlier on Saturdays, but
It looks like the last 2 days of voting they have an extra hour.
That's
And
right.
I think that was a decision that the election commission made just recently to make sure that there's enough time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So hopefully, not having the flexible schedule to get to the polls isn't going to be any excuse for somebody missing a vote this election, because we've got Saturday voting from 11 to 5 at almost all of these locations. Sometimes even starting as early as 8 a.m. at some locations. So for a more detailed look at that, go to the Knox County Election Commission's website, and they've got a page with all of that schedule listed out. And so there's also issues of absentee voting. If you are not going to be able to make it to the actual polling locations, then you can apply for an absentee ballot. You can find that at the Election Commission's website. Very important thing for people that are, over the age of 60 or hospitalized or in a nursing home or going to be away from the polls on election day with no other way to make it.
Let me just say something about absentee voting. I know that Cliff Rogers and the Election Commission are very interested in making sure people know that's available.
Mm-hmm.
And for anyone who is over 60, you can apply for the ballot. You do not have to need an excuse. Your excuse is you're over 60. You can mail in your application before the 31st of October. They'll mail you back the ballot, vote, and get it in before the 7th of November, and you don't leave your home.
Right. And what's easier than that?
What's easier? Yeah.
And of course, for anybody that does go to a poll, you have to have your state or federal government issued photo ID if you plan on voting at the polls. But even if you happen to forget it, or if for some other reason you're not able to vote at the polls, people need to know that they can also cast a provisional ballot.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's a little known thing, I think. If somebody tells you, well, we don't have you on our rolls, or you didn't bring your photo ID and we can't let you vote here today, you can always cast a provisional ballot. Mm-hmm. And they will review that later. Might just give you an extra chance to bring your photo ID in later so that your vote can count. So.
I will say this, my experience is that they're very good about that. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they do not want anybody leaving the poll without having cast a ballot that has a chance to be voted, counted. Yeah.
And that's a great thing, as we've said, and as we saw in the primary election, one vote can count for a lot. So be sure to cast it.
In fact, let's talk about that for just a minute.
Sure.
In every district, there are two candidates, except one district has a third candidate because one of those who got the tie vote is running as a write-in candidate. In fact, if I think we've got a picture of the ballot itself, and there you can see it on the screen. And on this one, there's just 3 districts. If you go to the next page, you'll see a district that's got 2, and it's got Lauren Ryder and Harry Tyndall in it, but there's also a write-in candidate for that, Amelia Parker. So there's and I mean, there's ample opportunity. There should be no sense that you can't vote. Yet, and by the way, every voter gets to vote in every district. You said that earlier,
Right?
And that's an important aspect of it. So when you come, you're not going to just vote for one of the 2 people in your district, but you're going to vote for the the citywide election. And there are reasons for it. Some pretty good, some maybe not quite as strong, but that's the way it is.
Yeah, that's the way we do it right now, for sure.
Exactly.
And that's a great point about the fact that we do have a registered write-in candidate for this election.
Right.
And so I guess people are wondering, how does that actually do? Do you actually have to write?
You have to
Well,
write in.
you use the.
They've got a pen, haven't they?
Or is it that you turn the dial to select the letters?
Right, I guess that's what it is. Yeah, that's right. You use the dial.
It's the electronic voting booth.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
might take you a little while, but they're not. You don't have to spell the person's name exactly right. They've got a lot of different permutations, combinations of that person's name. So if it doesn't happen to get in there letter perfect, it still will be counted if you get it close enough.
Yeah, I would compliment our election commission. They really make an effort to make sure that everyone can vote, and that once you do vote, that your vote is actually counted. Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, what else to say? This has just been it's an exciting time. I think Knoxville's going to have a very new city council, a very interesting city council, and I would say thanks to the candidates for appearing on this show with us. And that was not an easy thing for them to do because we really had a fixed schedule. They came and met that schedule, and I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, I think it was, from my end, it was great. I learned a lot, got to see everybody's different views on things, and I think hopefully the most important thing that we did was educate our viewers on these candidates. So hopefully this won't be such a daunting thing to walk into that ballot booth on November the 7th or during early voting and feel informed about who these candidates are.
Well, and let me close, Michael, by saying thank you to you for doing this. This
was my pleasure.
This was not I mean, this wasn't a simple thing to do. You had to be here a lot of time and ask the same questions of the same people. I think you did an excellent job, and I appreciate that. And we appreciate your viewing these shows, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you.